What's up, guys? Welcome back to Entrepreneur Hour Podcast and Entrepreneur Hour TV, where we create superhuman entrepreneurs. Got a guest today. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to focus on financial planning, investing, what you should be doing. I think we don't really talk about the fiscal health of our companies very often, specifically startups. We kind of just put it off as that. We'll get to that when we get to that. And maybe that's what you should be doing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. So we're going to talk to Mr. Andrew Escher today from the Ronin Society about what you should be doing. Andrew, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Great, Chris.
Dude, it's different to have you back in our home here, not under the context of the last time you were here, which was a costume party.
Yeah.
A little bit different, huh?
Yeah, this is an entirely different thing. Entirely different place, almost a different world.
A little bit.
That was like, I don't know. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. So what is the Ronin Society? What is the work that you do? I know you're excited about it. I remember you talked to me about making the transition to the Ronin Society. What do you guys do? And we'll get into some of the nuances of the challenges that people experience and how you guys help them.
Cool. Yeah. So I joined the Ronin Society about 8 months ago. The Ronin Society is a financial advisor for small and medium-sized businesses, typically between like $200,000 in revenue and $25 million. And we bring financial advising, institutional level finance, and then management consulting practices to like the small market.
Yeah. And
that can help entrepreneurs work out partnership issues, work out hiring decisions, or figure out where to grow.
Okay. So that's a pretty big gap, 200,000, 25 million. Is there anything that kind of dictates who specifically you guys work with, or is it just those revenue milestones? Is it, typically people that are emerging technologies, or do you see anything specific?
Yeah. So one of my clients is an ice cream shop. Another one is a pie company. Another one is a vegan dip maker. So that's like all CPG, right? Consumer product goods. But then another one is a live events animation production company. And another one is interior design. So those are more service industry based businesses. And then we have some that are like construction and others that are e-commerce, like selling things made in China here. So like that's just my client list I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
Throughout the society, we really have everything. But what they don't have a full-time finance person at a high level typically. They'll have like a comptroller or someone with good accounting experience and a bookkeeper.
At what point is this you're referencing?
The bigger clients of ours, like
They still don't.
they probably won't have someone full-time because it's a non-revenue generating role.
Yeah.
And then for the small ones, a lot of times they won't have anyone on their team. It'll literally just be them going at it alone, maybe a few subcontractors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So then what do some of the challenges look like? I would imagine it's case by case given that you're in so many different industries. But what are some of the challenges that they experience that you guys are able to help them with? Or kind of what are the commonalities that you see? You start working with them, wow, these are the big issues that we see that we need to address immediately.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people who would look at all the problems that you solve on this podcast and kind of talk about and what your program goes through and a lot of what the books in your book club go through, like just general business management. And you can read books, but then like figuring out how that applies to your situation is really hard. So like one-on-one coaching with you, I'm certain is really valuable for people to just be like, yeah, this idea, I like it. I just don't know how it applies. And you come in and you instantly see it. We just do that at a scale where we have a few like tools involved, like the financial models. And what those tools allow us to do is like consistently make sure that the things that we're coming together to as good ideas are actually working. And then the second thing is we can get management engaged in those things. So I think that's the problems we can solve, is getting people like engaged in solving issues and kind of seeing solutions forward.
What is it about, I don't know why, Andrew, I see this all the time. You'll have somebody come, they have no problem admitting that they need marketing help, or that man, I'm just so bad at sales, or they're willing to put their hubris aside for certain things that they feel comfortable with. I don't know what it is. Maybe you see this, maybe you don't. I've experienced it and seen it. But something about when it comes to financials, people always try to kind of like put stuff under the rug or maybe avoid some things. They're not as transparent. I know a lot of CPAs have that issue where they kind of get a sunny day scenario of what's going on and they look at the books and that's not what's going on at all. Is that part of the problem? Why is it that we're so embarrassed about what's going on with our financials and what's the real opportunity there for us to just be forthcoming and more candid or transparent with those things?
I think it's because a lot of people value money a lot.
Yeah.
Like, there's some people, I'd consider myself in this group, like, philosophically just understand money's not going to buy happiness beyond a certain point. You're okay with that. And a lot of people like that don't end up in these leadership positions of companies. So people who are really in these leadership positions a lot of times of bigger companies and they're managing a bunch of people jump into it because they see this allure of power and status.
Yeah.
And they're natural leaders. So it's like something that goes along with being a natural leader is having those things and admitting that they don't have those things. Or that a down year, you had a super successful first 2 years and you have a down year and you thought you knew what you were doing and you don't, but everyone around you thinks you know what you're doing. And you can't admit to your staff, this is a terrible down year. Like, we're really going to struggle to pay you. Because as a leader, like, you set the vision and that would pollute the culture that you have built of success. Yeah. And so there's this real difficulty of, like, maintaining your image and the story in the people's heads that work with you without, like, having the perception that you're being successful. And I think it's really damaging.
Dude, that's such a good point. I totally agree. And I think the problem is, and you see this all the time, where companies, they're not transparent with their employees, with themselves, with anybody. And what ends up happening is, next thing you know, they close the doors and everybody's out of a job, right? When it maybe could have been addressed beforehand. So how do you guys come into play, or what's the benefit, rather, to have someone like you guys that can come in, and is it just alleviating or addressing the fear? Is it just kind of getting those skeletons out of the closet and saying, here's what we do? Because sometimes it's like, you get a bad diagnosis, you go to the doctor, you get a bad diagnosis. Sometimes people leave and they're actually relieved with a bad prognosis just because they have a diagnosis. All right? So is that kind of what you guys do, is you make people, or you force them to really reconcile what's going on and deal with it and address it, versus letting it build to be this big nasty thing that they just ignore that hides under the bed all the time?
Yeah, I think it's two things. One is we bring out the problems, so you can't hide. Either you're legitimately just lying about the books, or we're going to find there's an issue by looking at the books. So one was we just, like, notice. And first we notice, and then we say, let's focus on that. Our costs where you thought they were. Why? And, like, you just walk through that in 3 or 4 meetings, and it comes clear why. I don't have to say anything. All I have to do is say, look at this. Get out of the day-to-day, look at the high level, and realize that those, underutilization of your employees by 10%, the not having an inventory software management system, so you occasionally have to reorder and put a week back, or you stocked out because you didn't hire the right inventory management person, and you didn't, like, be cognizant enough as an owner on your managers. So, like, we call that out. And then the second thing is, we've seen it a lot before. So, I have 10 clients that I'm going through management issues with at any one time. Wow. So I get to come in and be like, your problem maybe seems super unique to you. You've never seen anything like this, but thousands of people have dealt with this exact same situation. And there's documentation, there's tools.
Yeah, and I think that normalizes it. I was thinking that about, when I've worked with other people, when I go to a financial planner, or I work with anybody, a marketing person, whatever, just them telling me as an expert, dude, you're not alone. Everybody goes through this. It normalizes the process, I feel, where I think we tell ourselves a story as business owners that we're the only person that has this bad financial whatever going on, or we're underutilizing our workforce, or whatever that situation entails. We tell ourselves that we're the only person experiencing that dilemma or that problem. And when reality comes into play, I think what we find is that it's very, very normal in most cases, and it's very, very common. So it sounds like that's a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah, and if you talk about it with your husband at home, you're a complainer. Yeah. And you don't want to bring that stuff home. If you talk about it with your managers, maybe there's internal politics or something negative there. And if you talk about it with your co-owners, they can have different opinions. Like, there's so many relationships maintained on these stories, and if you need a false story you can't like admit you're lying or things like that. Like you have to slowly figure out together as a group that you need to believe a different story. And sometimes that story is like, we need to change. Almost always that story is we need to change. It's just, is it more success motivating that change, or is it fear of failure? And both of those are kind of things to look at.
So you would say that most of the time they're cognizant of the problem. They're just hiding from it, or how much of it is, wow, I didn't even realize this was an issue. This was a problem that you guys helped them identify.
So people who come to us and start working with us will almost always admit that they want some help with strategy.
Okay.
So by nature, they admit that they're willing to be like humble about it. Like, I don't know everything in business. I think almost all business owners are like that way. Non-humble people very rarely succeed because you just have to take a bunch of hits on the chin. So that's one. But then the second thing is things come to light because we start asking questions that are like, where's the direction of this company going to go? And if we ask a manager that, and we ask one owner that, and we ask one owner that in separate conversations, they've never had that conversation before together or without the other ones present. And so if we get all those people together and then we just say like, we need to triangulate this. If you guys are all going in these directions, where's the middle ground? And maybe there isn't. Maybe some of these discussions are we need to sell off a part of our business.
Yeah.
And people just won't want to even think that's possible, even though it's done all the time. It's like you write up 2 documents, you agree on evaluation, it's over. You buy or sell, either way, it doesn't work. If someone wants to leave, you can always find a way for them to leave. Because
there's too much sentimental attachment to it, or other reasons? They see it as an asset maybe that it is or that it isn't, or they think it's undervalued, or what reasons do they not want to part with it?
Man, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. So like, imagine you have a situation where you have a manager of a company that is also a part owner. They've built some ownership in through their bonus structure. And they're at the point where they're like, I run this whole thing. This is mine. Why do you get to keep 60% of the profits? I could go rebuild this myself. All I have is your brand, your brand name's all that you're worth. And that's not exactly true, but for a really competent manager that's built their own castle, like it basically is. And so there's some negotiation leverage there of like, this person is in the stage of their career where they want something different than they wanted when they started that. And it's in both parties' best interest for them to work out something mutual.
Right.
But really hard to have that conversation because you can see on the point of view of the other people, we gave you the salary to build this thing. It's only worth that because of our brand name. Whoa. Like,
yeah.
How do you get beyond that? And then you bring up the concept of evaluation. And then you bring up the concept of like another key employee leaving, and it gets put on the back burner.
Now, do you guys, so one of the things that I know is beneficial in those really sticky situations is having advisors, other people involved that can give a different respect. I don't want to call it a tiebreaker. I don't know if that's like a fair usage of verbiage here, but I'm almost wondering though if that's kind of the capacity that you guys play in this equation of, we've got a real issue here, right? And maybe one of the partners or one of the managers sees things differently like you just described. We've kind of maybe been stuck in this stalemate for a while. Is that part of the benefit of having someone like you guys involved, that you can be the tiebreaker, quote unquote?
Yeah, because these things happen all the time. Like that was kind of specific. But yeah, they get ugly, but sometimes they just don't get ugly at all, and they need to. Sometimes it kills the business because you structured one person's compensation wrong, and you never could talk with them about it.
Yeah, that's such a good point, man. I think sometimes it gets ugly, like you just said, because we're afraid to let it get ugly. So it just builds to be this thing that it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, I think that gives you guys so much permission to come in and really expose the true problems that are going on, because if they are avoiding or evading those issues, that's when those things. I've talked to attorneys, that work with businesses, specifically, corporate attorneys, and it's funny because they'll always tell me that it's easier to get out of a marriage than it is out of a business partnership. Like, it's really sticky, and then you bring in other blends, and a lot of people that are starting businesses are starting with friends and family and stuff like that, and you see relationships ruined because of it. I myself have experienced this. So it gets really, really tough, and I think one of the things that people don't do is they don't go in with the proper boundaries in place, resources around them, support. They draw off of the relationship that they have, be it personal or strictly professional, and they make assumptions wherein basically relationships can be damaged. So what do I mean by that is this. When you go into business with somebody that is a friend, or a family member, you assume we're friends, we're family, it's always going to be that way. So you kind of take that for granted, when in the reality of it, you should have flipped that. You should have been even more intentional about protecting the relationship. You should be even more, deliberate about setting those boundaries and how are we going to communicate with each other, planning what those expectations are going to look like, because that's when it gets ugly. I know it's not exactly what we were talking about, but I could see having somebody like you guys or someone like yourself to be able to say, look, man, here's my situation. My business partner is also my brother, and there's litigation being thrown around and threatening. He wants to go this way with the business. This was my situation exactly. My brother wanted to go take the business in one direction. I wanted to go another direction. He felt like he deserved equity. It got real sticky. There was threats of litigation. It got real ugly real fast. The problem is that it was my word against his. It was my view against his. There was no one else to come in and say, guys, here's the deal. This is what the numbers are saying. You can decide whatever you want to decide, but this is what the numbers dictate. Right? And this is the direction we see you guys should go based off of that, right? Just to kind of give us some little push in the right direction, because I think some people get so entrenched just by design, just by human nature, we get so entrenched in our viewpoints that we're unwilling to waver. We're unwilling to move off of them. And we see that right now. We're in an election cycle. And I've been talking about that a lot on my show. You see people kind of move into their stances, right? So much so that you feel like we're not even on the same team here as Americans, right? It gets ridiculous. So I think you see that, and I could really see that alleviating a lot of people's headaches, having you guys come in and be able to say, like, okay, I get all that, and there's all these other strings attached, and it's turning into Jerry Springer, but here's what the numbers say, and here's what we need to do in accordance with that.
Yeah.
Is that a typical situation, or is that blown out of proportion?
No. I mean, it's just super, it happens a lot, and it'll sit for months until it becomes a big deal, but it's like something that one or two conversations can just alleviate, because it's always based on assuming what someone else wants and not just like figuring that out across time. Like at one point when you and your brother went into business together, you guys wanted similar things, and then at some point that diverged, and then you stop having those conversations because you're already spending a lot of time together. I did this with 3 of my friends. We started a co-housing company, and one of our friends worked at a hostel, one of the partners. He found all the tenants. Like, he just had this like inn where we had people who were in a hostel. They wanted to live someplace longer. Let's fill all the rooms. But he filled the rooms then with tenants that would be shorter term tenants because they came from a hostel. So then there was more work to find tenants, whereas if me or the other partner had found tenants, we would have had 12-month leases. So where our position was, you found a lot more tenants, you did more sales activity, but by nature you made more work for yourself, and that's totally fine. But if you want a commission on those tenants, let's think about that. And we never discussed that, and so it came to this point where it's like, how much is this company worth? What are we going to do about this? And it's like 33, 30, 30, 33. Well, what about all those tenants I found? And then we're like, I don't know if you made more work for us. I don't know if we actually wanted you to do that. Probably we did. Like, I'm very happy at the time. But how do you navigate that? And maybe there is no right answer, and sometimes someone has to like feel a little bit slighted. But a lot of times having a outside party in there can just like diffuse it and just be like, okay, can we do a quick sales commissions plan? Like, maybe he can get something else for that, or we can set that up in the future. There's other ways.
Yeah. So here's kind of the dilemma that I see with people, because all this is relevant, totally relevant, and in both our situations, I don't know how far along you guys were in terms of revenue milestones. The issues with us became very prevalent around $500,000, right? Because when there's a little money involved, there's an easy out. There's really nothing at stake. I mean, feelings are hurt, but it's not like, hey, we've got $500,000 worth of change sitting around that we got to figure out who's going to get what. Right?
Yeah.
The bigger the issue, the bigger the money involved, the bigger the issue.
Yeah.
Right?
When you can buy a house, you're like, who's getting the house?
Right. So it gets a little sticky at that point. So I think part of the problem is that we have started down this journey early. Right, we jump in and say, we have this idea, right? You and your buddies are like, hey, we have this idea. Like, everybody's excited about the idea.
Yeah, super excited.
And it kind of sucks at that point. I always say this, and I totally get it, to be the Debbie Downer of the group and say, now guys, we've got to make sure that we, set the expectations and make sure who's going to get what. Think about contingencies and think about worst case scenario. Like, that sucks, and everybody hates to kind of rob away. They're like, why, dude, like, we're supposed to be happy about this thing and this idea, and it's beautiful, and we're going to make so much money, and like, that's really tough. So what can we do before we get to the point, because I assume you guys aren't cheap, you work with companies that are big companies, right? What can people be doing to work towards, right, setting the foundation for working with someone like you guys that then help them make the big decisions, but we're not having to fix messes. I mean, ideally, we wouldn't have to fix messes. Is that too idealistic, or is that possible? What can people be doing?
Yeah. So people change over time. So one thing I would say is like, I don't know, because I want to have like not want to start the company. And like part of the thing was when we started the co-housing place, it's like, who wrote the operating agreement? I did, and I did it by finding a boilerplate operating agreement.
Of course.
And like was like, do you guys want to read this? I'm just put in some stuff. You're gonna need to sign this. None of them read it. I could have literally put Andrew gets all the all the company if he says monkey in court.
Yeah.
You know, like I could have put anything I want in there.
Yeah.
And so part of it at the end, like 2 years later, I was like, you trusted me so much then. What's like the grind here?
So this didn't end well. I mean, it sounds like you guys had some conflict, but how did your situation end? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I think one of our partners still feels a little frustrated by it, and we're making up for it by that partner now is living in a different country, and so he still owns part of the company, and so we're going to do more work while he's out of town, and so hopefully we're just saying like in the long run it'll even out.
You told me about this not too long ago, about 6 months ago. You told me somewhat about this.
Maybe, yeah. That would be about the timeline, but yeah, there's.
Yeah, because I think I joked with you that you guys ran him out of the country.
Yeah. So again, like I think we're pretty good friends, and it was like a tense situation. We didn't have nearly as much money at stake, but I felt screwed over in business partnerships a lot before. I've worked with people who are much older than me. So the first thing I would say is never accept a contract that you don't want to stick with. And then if you realize it's something that you're farther along in your career as a manager or as someone becoming an owner or as just a different owner, if you start noticing there's a discrepancy in things, set an expectation of that you're going to have a conversation around it. Bring it up and have a time to just have that discussion. And then the other thing that we just do to help solve it is we have a discussion, and then second is just base it on numbers. Base it on like, okay, you think you're working much more than I am. Where's our time tracking on this? And like if you just base it on numbers, then it's going to be a lot more easy for you to take the emotion out of it. And sometimes a third party comes in and does that.
One of the things I tell people to do, and I want to see if you agree with this advice, is, they don't want to have legal. And I get that. But there's a difference between finding a boiler template like you found on Google, filling it out to the best of your ability, taking it to an attorney and saying, can I pay for an hour of your time to just review what we've done and make recommendations? And then basically having them draft it up from scratch. I think sometimes we think all or nothing. We don't find solutions.
Yeah.
We don't look for, and there's also too, in many situations in a lot of, startup friendly ecosystems, I would say Austin is one of them, where we live. But I've heard in many of these incubators, co-work spaces, they'll have mentors that can provide legal counsel, right? They're attorneys by trade. They will come in, host workshops, or you can get a group of people together, like let's say a group of 10 people, to ask similar type questions. And then that they pay for that person's time, but they do so collectively, right? So you might end up spending $100 and you pay for an entire workshop that was hours.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we need to look for solutions rather than just tell ourselves, well, attorneys are too expensive. Right? I think sometimes we do those things instead of just being like, okay, what's the true cost here? You know what I mean? And I see that with people with business accounts too all the time, where people are just running their business with their personal bank account. They don't have it separated. They're like, oh, well, I'll do that. They're like, it's going to be a big pain in the butt. And it's really not. There's solutions out there to help you kind of really make that transition seamless. But I think we tell ourselves it's going to be more challenging or more of a pain than what it actually is going to be.
Yeah. I think actually that's kind of one of the theses of the Ronin Society, is that like good institutional bookkeeping is hard to set up but pretty easy to maintain, and deep analytical work is easy to be done at scale if you have good data. And so what we can basically do is we say you don't have to pay for a full-time CFA, 20 years of industry experience to come in and get you the SKU level costing setup that you would need to be able to grow a CPG business. Right. Like you could hire someone for $160,000 to come in and do just that in your business, or you can hire us at a fraction of that, and you'll get a strategist who's seen it before. You'll get an analytical team, and they'll use your existing resources. So we'll come in and we'll just say like, you need that person to start taking these numbers down. And they do that, and then our team doesn't need to be in there 40 hours a week. You have someone who's already in the business who should be monitoring this. And then our incentive isn't like scope creep. It's like, give us better data. We'll help make strategic decisions based on that, and then we'll empower you to be more tactically involved in making your line of business better. And that's the upscaling that it's like incredible to see. Like our clients legitimately will take managers, people from like front line, don't understand anything about the business, to like can read a P&L statement and know exactly how they impact that on both a cost and revenue side.
So let's talk about opportunity.
Cool.
I think a lot, the other big hurdle, I mentioned one for a lot of people that I think that we see a lot, and I felt myself, is the investment, right? Whether it's advisors or attorneys or whatever, right? I mean, how much money I'm gonna have to spend? $6,000, like I'm gonna have to, probably unrealistic, but there's a financial aspect involved there. And I think too, sometimes we're not fully convicted with the idea, right? And so we don't want to go spend, several $1,000s on something that's just an idea right now. And I do understand that. And I would rather see someone get out and dive in, make money, and then have to go back and maybe fix some issues, right? But I'd rather see them take action. And I always say that. But I think one of the other problems, at least that I see, is they don't see the real opportunity in doing the things you're talking about, right? They're like, well, I just need to get out and make money. But sometimes I think what people don't understand, and maybe we need to nuance it a little bit further for them, is you may have opportunities that are more fruitful than others because there's higher margins associated. Or you may be running your business or going after a segment of your market that's not going to be fruitful for you to pursue, right? So talk about the real opportunity in terms of growth, in terms of them achieving their goals in their business. What are the real opportunities for them to actually know and have those data points that you mentioned, to know their numbers, to be in their books, to have people giving them advice, stuff like what you guys are doing. Give us an example maybe of a time where you found something and somebody changed the course of their business and exploded as a result. Put you on the spot, man.
Yeah, that's so we have a series of shops in Austin that have been around for about 10 years now, when they opened their first store in their retail shop. And they grew slowly for their first couple of years, and their founders, was a passion project that grew into something bigger than that. And at one point it became really, really difficult for them to manage. And they said, we either need to get out of this or we need to double down on this but find someone to run it.
Yeah.
And that's when we got involved. And that basically their problem was like, we've been successful at this, but almost too successful, because all we wanted to do was, like in their case, make ice cream. All I wanted to do is make ice cream and make the world's best ice cream. And they succeeded in that. People loved it. They wanted to eat that ice cream. And then so they were able to open more shops. And then we need to hire a manager, because these people who were great founders don't want to run a 100-person company with huge inventory problems and management issues.
That's
and
serious
like
shelf life, I would think too.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of
items.
things to manage, and there are people out there who are like at a different stage of their career that want to come into something that's like unique and innovative and has a passion of a founder's and bring in all of this cool experience they've brought in. But like, how do these founders start having conversations with people in that industry? And how do they know about the knowledge required to set that up? The first thing that we think we do is we upscale their financial knowledge of how the business runs. So then when they understand like cost, revenue, and they can see those numbers in moments, like when they're like, hey, this happened last month and that affected the cost this way, they can go and ask that candidate, hey, cost did this. How would you avoid that cost issue from happening again? And if they ask that specific question and that guy gives a good answer, maybe a good candidate. If he doesn't, maybe that's a vetting process. So that's an example, though, is we took that company and we've helped them hire new management and like set up funding structures so that they can continue to grow.
Did you find in that situation that they felt stuck in what they've created, in what they had created, that they weren't seeing solutions because they felt stuck?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you just do it, and you've already been so creative. You've already been so creative. You've literally, by sheer force of will, put something into place, and you look back and you're like, was it worth it? Because now I'm in this spot.
Yeah.
And it was worth it, but you just got to hire yourself out of that spot.
Yeah, in the book, the E-Myth series, which is fantastic, Michael E. Gerber, he talks about this dilemma of technician-run business owners, right? Like, not dissimilar to what you're talking about. And I think a lot of us, we have the technician in us, right? The things that we inherently are really, really good at. And so the problem is with the technician founder, what you'll find is, I think the example they give is like a bakery and, making cupcakes. When there's a problem in the business, usually what a technician will do will go back into the cupcakes. They just bury themselves in the cupcakes. Well, it must be the cupcakes. It must be this, right? They don't look at, the other aspects or the other levers in the business that maybe need to be pulled. They just kind of want to, not dissimilar again to what you were talking about. Like, we just wanted to make good ice cream.
And they were super successful because they made good cupcakes.
Because they made good cupcakes.
That's what made it. That's
ice cream, right?
That's what happened. So
Right,
why
right.
would you not double down on that?
Right. So sometimes I think what we do, though, is we tell ourselves these false narratives, right? Again, now you're talking about, we already covered it, talking about fear of being candid and transparent about financials. We've talked about, maybe not seeing the opportunity, not seeing what's really going on. Now we're talking about, okay, but I feel stuck and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do, so I'm just going to bury myself in the work. And what you'll find, Andrew, is a lot of people will do that for 30 years and they just stay stuck like that, right? And there are solutions, viable solutions out there. So at what point does somebody know, I've exhausted all my creative thinking, right? It's time for me to seek someone out. What does that someone look like? Obviously, you're biased, so it's probably going to look like you, and rightfully so. But what are some things they can be doing to make sure that they're not finding themselves looking back in reflection 5 years down the line to say, we made some really damn good ice cream, but man, we could have taken this so much further, or we could have been living the lives we want to live. I always say this. People, if they're not careful, end up building a jail cell around themselves. I left a prison in my 9 to 5, what felt like jail, and then I went to go build this thing and ended up building a jail cell around myself with my business, right? So how do we end up not in that situation? How do we end up building the business that we want and having that creative thinking, solution-based thinking, so that we are creating that and are moving towards the ultimate life that we want to lead?
Yeah. Well, I'm still young, and like all these people that I'm talking about too, the cool thing is like they're smarter than me in so many ways. So I get to learn from all the business owners and like their managers and all these people's success. And it's like much greater than any challenges that they face. I mean, that's obviously why they're able to hire us and continue to be successful. So like focusing on the fact that you've been successful before is important, like keeping that in mind if you're facing struggles. But then how do you like figure out that you need to get help?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing you do is you look at your team and you say, hey, do I know how to like make these people upskill? And if it's not your team, is it like software solutions? Do I know how to make things that are difficult for me now easier in the future? And like just every month ask yourself that question. What have I done to either make a member of my team stronger or better at the thing they're supposed to be doing? Or what software or process improvement have I put in place? And if you teach your managers to put the software, you make like a self-replicating system that just gets better and better.
Yeah.
So like people are more important than systems because they keep getting better. So that's what I would do. And then like if you're having trouble doing that, if you're like, I don't know how to approach these conversations, I'm not even sure what targets I should set for people, I don't know how to hold people accountable, those are all very real questions. And there are experts out there who can do it. You can read books, but I think the best thing is like expand your team. And expand your team with someone who's like on your side. And I would look out for people who like genuinely want to help your business. So I think there are a lot of like wasteful firms out there and like ways you can spend money. I'd recommend them listen to you first and read a couple books. But then basically if you find someone, if they have success stories that they've helped other people through, and then if you're like just having someone to talk this out with in a framework.
Yeah. That was the part I was hoping you'd say is you find somebody to talk to, right? That has been there, that has done that. I always say this is where mentorship is fantastic, because I'll go back to a point I made previously about normalizing. I think when you have a mentor that has been through the predicament that you're going through, it normalizes it and makes it feel okay. I think so many of us feel a level of shame or guilt or whatever around our situation, specifically if it's a situation that we created ourselves. Right?
Yeah.
Because you have nobody to blame but yourself if you are the one that created the problem, right? Or indirectly. So I think that's a huge part of it. One other thing I would ask you about that I'm a firm believer in is to plan time for disengaging. Because I don't know what it is about removing yourself physically, and maybe you're able to do that with what you said, right? You need to expand your team, you need to hire new people, you need to get, more talent involved, because maybe you are carrying too much, and that's you're working too much in the business, not on the business. That's a huge problem that I see a lot of, and people tell themselves they can't afford to hire anybody when there's outsourcing solutions. Like, we've got an entire team in the Philippines, right? So like there are solutions out there. We're in a global market. You can find whatever you need. It's just a matter of looking for it,
Yeah.
right? But I think disengaging, even if it's just, I don't recall. I think it was Gary Keller. Don't quote me. But he said that the most successful people basically work between their vacations. And every year, going into the year, they plan out, okay, I'm going to go to these places. And usually it's about 3 months at a time. They're going somewhere every 3 months. And they're somewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the reason is not because they just want to be out and live a lavish life. It's because you work with such a degree of intensity that by default, whenever you operate in extremes, you further immerse yourself into that frame of mind, into that kind of narrow focus, so you lose perspective of the macro. When you're so entrenched in the micro, you can't see the macro anymore, right? It's just how we are. It's how our brain works. So one of the things that he and many others that I've read about talk about is by removing yourself physically from the situation, right? Even if it's for a long weekend, 4 or 5 days, what you end up doing is gaining entirely new perspective. So when you come back, you're able to finally see things the way they are. And I tell people this: leave your business for a while, once a week, because what you'll find is you're going to see all of the things that don't work when you're removed. Because so many people are the glue and the engine and everything that makes their business run. When they're removed from the equation, things fall apart. Well, here's the deal. Let's, instead of freaking out about, well, if I leave, everything's going to fall. Okay, calm down. Let's do that, and then let's go fix those problems. Because you said something, people and systems. Completely agree with that, people and systems. You don't know what's broken. You don't know what to fix. You don't know what to build until you remove yourself from the equation. If your business relies on you, you don't have a business yet. You just don't, right? So I think that's...
Well, you don't have an asset. That business that's an asset. Your work, yeah.
Right. So I think that's a huge problem that many of us don't give ourselves permission to take is, look, I get the hustle grind. I get the 18 to 24 hour, work days. People are going crazy and this and that. I totally get that, and I'm not a believer that we can substitute hard work. I'm not. I think that's a fundamental part of the equation. I've never been able to hack my way to anything in terms of success that didn't require hard work.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. I do believe in counterbalance, and I think part of counterbalance is removing yourself to be able to see the forest for the trees, to be able to see things for what they are, and do some analysis and assessment on what's really going on, plus to give yourself some clarity.
Yeah. So I agree with everything you just said. I started learning guitar last year, end of 2018, and I didn't really take lessons. I just started playing around on it, and I had a guitar when I was 13, but I didn't learn it. And I learned guitar this time because I got an electric that was easier to play and a loop pedal, so it was more fun to play, and I could just like slowly pick up stuff. Like I could make something sound good and loop it over it. And I learned doing that, like I can try to force myself to do a bunch of stuff I don't want to do, or I can just do what I want to do and find people around me to do everything I don't want to do. And when I was younger, I didn't have the cash for that. But now I do. And I'm like, anytime I want to invest in somebody else doing something better, I either learn how to better manage people because they fail at it, or I get it done and it's repeatable and I know I can spend money, get result. And that, like, embracing my laziness, and the Ronin team approach kind of allows that. Like I can do strategic high-level decision making and be like, I need a bunch of data to figure this out. And I have an analyst team that can help me find that data. So I don't have to like say like, oh, to solve this problem, I would need to do all this work. Right. I just say like, to solve this problem, I need all this work done. I have a team. And so like, I love that. And yeah, I'm all about it. So
that's the premise of lateral thinking. Because here's the deal. we take, I say this all the time, we take the model, or we're playing the game of a 9 to 5, but we take that same game and all the pieces and we try to play that same game in entrepreneurship. And it's like, why? Like, this isn't a rite of passage.
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
Like, you're not going to earn points for doing all the things and juggling all the balls. Like,
or for it not being fun. You don't earn points for like not enjoying your life.
This really sucks. I know it's going to pay off because it sucked. It's like, no, you just made life harder than it had to be, right? So is that part of what you guys see with people kind of allowing themselves to be liberated from that mindset, or that thought process?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Like either the process of like this business is my only ego gratification. Sometimes that's it. And it's like, let's remove that. Sometimes it's I have to work with these people because they're the only way I know how to be successful. Sometimes it's my managers are incompetent. I don't know how to bring it up with them. Sometimes it's I've got so much debt and I just don't know how to handle this and get this business that does make profit in some months steady. And there's all these different things that go into it. And basically the biggest way out is just like creative thinking and not getting caught up in the emotion of like fear, but just being like, I've done things good in the past. There are people out there who I can incentivize to help me solve this. Some of them are on my team already. And people out there want what I'm selling. And like as long as those three things are true, you'll eventually be successful.
What do you guys do to help people? The word has come up a lot since we've been chatting. Fear, right? I know that's a big one.
Oh yeah, since everyone like the world is crazy right now.
Right. I mean, you look at how animals react to fear. You know, the whole deer in the headlights. I think a lot of business owners, that's how they're operating. Deer in headlights, right? And they freeze. You know, it's not flight or fright. Flight or fright. It's actually there's freeze as well now too. So, what do you guys do to help them process maybe, or move past the fear, or reconcile, or deal with, or whatever phraseology you want to utilize?
Yeah. So I think there's fear and then there's just comfort are two like major things that business owners are like struggling with, because a lot of these people are already successful and they're just like, would it really be that different to like get to that next stage where I don't have to actually work in the business at all? Yeah. But how to deal with like fear specifically is to just write out your options. Like legitimately, what do you fear? Put it on paper. Put the worst story you can imagine on paper. And then do that. And if this happens, I'll move to the country.
Right.
And if this happens, I'll go fix cars for a living. And I used to have this. I still fight this a lot of times. I used to think that entrepreneurs were the only heroes in the world, and like people fixing cars are heroes too, and police officers are heroes, and like people who are in the medical field are heroes, and people in those fields also aren't heroes all the time. But like you can be a hero and live your own competent life and be a great husband or wife, and you don't have to be an entrepreneur. And I think like that's freeing too. Like get over the fact that the only way to be successful in life is this certain path, and that if you left that path or if it didn't go the right way perfectly, that you are less than as a human. Yeah. Like take your ego out of it, and then you're just going to be so much better, because you're going to be like, I only want this company if it is the way I want it to be, and I can leave it. And then like by giving that nature, you give the opportunity for other people to come in and say like, don't leave it. We need you here, or empower me so that you can leave it better and I still have a job. Like people want what you're doing is valuable. You're in that situation because people rely on you. If you're in that situation where you feel trapped, you're in that situation because you've like developed so much value. It's just right now it feels like you're not trading it adequately. Yeah. And so figure out different trades to make with people. It starts with deliberate communication. But yeah, that's how you get over fear.
Yeah. It's interesting, man, because I think it was Brene Brown that said, courage is staring in the face of likely failure but continue to move forward anyways. And I think sometimes we lack the courage because of not doing what you just said, which is writing things down, like what is the worst that could actually happen if I whatever. And in most situations, you're not going to die. You're still going to be okay. And I think once you've actually experienced some of those failures, you realize the sun rises and everything, you can just try again the next day. I think it kind of alleviates some of those concerns that you may have. But you bring up another really good point that I want to bring up and mention that I think is so huge, specifically as you kind of transition and you see businesses grow and blossom, is we talked about having an asset, right? And building an asset. An asset is an asset when it can run without you, right? I think so many people think that the reason why their business is what it is because of them, and they're probably not wrong. But I have to really always challenge, and maybe you have to see that, maybe you see this too and have to work with people on this. I have to challenge people to remove themselves because they have a difficult time doing what you said, which is, dude, why are you still doing all this stuff? Like, you can give this to other people. You don't have to do all this work anymore. They struggle with that because I think they fail to realize what they're going to provide now, what value they're going to serve in their own business, and let go of that. And so I always tell them, okay, have you ever had a job before at a real 9 to 5, right? Like, yeah. Did you ever expect your boss to do X, Y, Z? Did you ever like think that your boss would personally do X, Y, Z? Whatever those things entail, and they're like, no, that's ridiculous. I'm like, exactly, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right. So what do business owners have to do to know when the right time it is to start peeling things away from themselves versus, you know what, right now I can't just start and just hire out everything, right? I can't fiscally afford to do that, because that is a real dilemma that people have, right? Especially if they're not funded.
Yeah.
So and sometimes I think when people get early funding, they blow it because they haven't had to go through that struggle of understanding how a business works, the specifics of you know, how to grow a company, all those various aspects.
Yeah.
So how do you guys help people determine now's the time to peel this away, now's the time to outsource this, now's the time to hire this? What do those things look like? How do you guys help people tangibly work through that process?
Yeah, so goal definition, what's your growth story is kind of how we start with. So we get a financial model. We get what's called managerial books in place, which means their accounting is something they can make decisions based on. And there's a lot of things that make most startups' books not managerial. You can't predict cost and revenue matching accurately. You're just not invoicing correctly. Like, there's all kinds of crazy things. You don't have really well-defined revenue streams that can be tied to specific actions in the business. So you get all that stuff taken care of. Then you write out the growth story, which is like, where do we want to go? Where's our goal? And once you have that growth story in place and the fundamental model to track your progress to that goal, all that you can do on your own or with a team like us. But once you have that, you sit and you look at all the assets in your business. Most of the time it's people or systems. And you say, what do I need to put in place to make that better? Just one piece at a time. And a lot of times it's as easy as just saying, I need to give this person this target, and every month I need to ask them if they're hitting it or not. And I might need to give them a bonus if they hit it 3 months in a row. If you know the numbers and you know someone who you can make responsible, the crazy thing is you can do that with like marketing, and like you could literally go out to some marketer that's struggling right now and say, like, if you hit 3 return on ad spend for me, I'll give you $2,000 budget a month. If you hit 3 return on ad spend for me on that amount of money, I'll give you $500. If you do it for 3 months, I'll give you $10,000 a month in ad spend and $2,000 from then on out. Maybe not anyone will do that, but there's probably someone who can work within you if you start figuring out the ways it's going to help your business, and you make sure you only make win-win deals. And then at some point you actually have to put money in. I think from like your and my perspective, you and I both should never ever spend time working in a business for more than like 3 or 4 months early on. You and I should hire somebody to do the tactical work inside the business, because our minds are better spent on strategy.
Yeah.
And we're just
no. And I've had mentors that I've hired and worked with, and they were like, "Look, you're clearly the visionary type, and are you going to fight me on being the integrator?" And I'm like, "I'm not." Like, because I've had to understand and embrace what you just said.
Yeah, set a budget for yourself, because you are an owner.
Yeah.
You are not a CEO. Some people are CEOs. Some people want to be that, or some people are their owners and their COOs.
Right. Ice cream shop, perfect example, right?
Then go get investors. Like, if you want to be an OO and you're like, I'm good at this, I know what I want to do for 10 years, I want to be an operating officer. Find a company where you can go be an operating officer that already exists, or raise funding. Like, don't try to force something that's not there.
How do you know, though, if you're a visionary or an integrator? How do you know if that's your situation, if you want to be an operator? Is it just a heart thing, a gut thing? Or is there something that like indicates to you like you're probably better suited to be a visionary or a visionary role?
Yeah, I can't speak for everybody, but like, I've known it. I just get really bored when doing repetitive tasks over and over again.
Yeah. I think that's also part of the challenge. That's why I bring it up, is resistance to embrace and accept who we are.
Yeah.
Right?
Accept yourself. Like, you're not a lazy piece of crap because you don't want to do reports all day, or because you can't stand on your feet being a server. And you're not a lazy piece of crap because you're okay with being a server and you just want to be a server. Like, getting over this, like, I have to be something, that's a whole cultural thing, bag of worms that we just got to get comparison with different people being differently valued because of money. Our society screws it up so bad. Get that out of your head, and you're going to be like light years ahead in having these discussions, because you can just take ego out of it.
You're free to paint on your own blank canvas.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell you just because it's right now what we're talking about. But for like months, I watched him struggle with this idea of waking up at 4:30 in the morning, because Jocko Willing says, get up at 4:30 in the morning because discipline is freedom. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Like, it's tremendous that it works for him. Like, that's his mantra, and I respect that. But it's not working for you, and you've given it many months. And so I think there's a difficult balance between I'm not disciplined enough, or I'm not X, or I'm not Y, and that it does say something about your own deficiencies. But eventually I was like, why do you really want to do this? Like, what is this? What utility is this adding to your life to be able to wake up at 4:30 in the morning? What difference does it make if you wake up at 9 and you work until 8 o'clock at night when he works until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Because I'm not a morning person. I'll spot you the 2 hours. I'll wake up at 6:30 or 7 or 7:30. I'll spot you those 2, 3, 4 hours. I guarantee you that my work productivity, working within alignment with who I am, not being a morning person, I will make up for it in sheer productivity and sheer efficiency because I have created a work model that works for me.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't give ourselves permission to do that. And I think that really hurts us in so many ways, not dissimilar to what we're talking about with when to hire, when to create a business that's for you, when to do, all this financial planning. Like, understand who you are, because fundamentally, I don't care what the numbers say. If it doesn't align with who you are, I don't want you going that direction anyways, right? Like, that's a big part of the discussion.
Oh, no. And, like, it also allows you to get so much better at it. Like, by just saying, so, again, I started at Ronin 8 months ago, and I had started a few companies before then. I've been in startups and consulting for my whole life, and finance is my background. So I kind of came into this as, like, company leadership, finance. But now every day for the last 8 months, I've lived and breathed with founders, looking at really hard business problems, running through financial models, and all these issues we've been talking about. Every day, I spend all my time figuring out these really hard, high-level concepts that take weeks to get my head around and, like, absorb enough information. And I've gotten comfortable asking people for the information I need. 8 months ago and today, I was worth it 8 months ago. But today, I am, like, so much better because that's all I've done. Because I haven't had to spend a bunch of time on being a salesperson for Ronin. I don't have to go out and find clients. I don't have to do anything except for just, like, work in a system. And if you are a founder, or anyone else in your team is in a place where you can just put them in a system where their only job is to do something they really like doing, and they're going to get better at it, but just doing it for more time. If you take everything away from them on doing that, you'll see exponential results, because literally they're just wasting their time on everything else, and they have something that they're good at, passionate about. And like you said, until I had this job, I never wanted to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning. There are days when there's, like, a really cool project, and I get up at, like, 6:30, nervous, anxious, excited, and I became a morning person and a night person because of the job.
That's awesome.
Which is cool. Which, again, like, I thought I was lazy too before then, but I'm not. It's just, like, you got to be properly motivated. Did you ever play sports? You used to play sports growing up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Saturday morning, you might not be a morning person, but before a soccer game, like, as even an 11-year-old, that's the day you're up.
Yeah, totally. So where do people go to learn more about not only you, if they want to continue the conversation, learn more about what you're up to with the Ronin Society, but also what can they do to learn more about Ronin?
Cool. Yeah. So I think the best thing is to go to our website, theroninsociety.com. We have a couple tools up there and some really good interviews with entrepreneurs that we've worked with and other ones in the space.
Sweet.
Recently, a lot of that's been CPG. The other thing I would say, just to anyone listening, CPG is a huge space right now that's going to have a lot of disruption. With e-commerce, things being sold online via these new methods, e-commerce is just skyrocketing. HEB and these grocery stores are going to need new suppliers and new products to keep people interested. And restaurants are possibly going to be replaced in a large amount. So, like, where's that food going to come from? Totally. Yeah, there's a bunch of interesting things. RoninSociety.com, and then you can reach out to me via Facebook or,
Awesome.
That's probably
I'll include those links below. All right, man, true Austin style. We got a topo, clink it up.
Thanks, Chris.
See you guys in the next one.